Solomon is the director of the Waste Management Department of the Accra Metropolitan Assembly in Ghana. Thank you all for being here today. Perhaps I'd like to start with you, Barbara. Maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what's it like to be you every day and trying to change our condition when it comes to fashion.
So I'm indeed State Secretary responsible for economic transition and scientific research in Brussels. When I say that, a lot of people tell me, so where is the man in charge of the economy? But I am also the man in charge of the economy in Brussels. But when we decided to use these titles, this economic transition concept was to show that we want our economy to change and to be, all of our economy in Brussels, to be more sustainable, more responsible. More responsible on our territory, but also taking into account the impacts of the way of life, actually, in Brussels, outside Brussels, just around Brussels, but also in the countries in the south. The impacts, the social impacts, but also, of course, the environmental impacts. So that's my everyday job.
So, I mean, obviously, the very basis of your work, when we talk about imagination, is that you have to work with pre-existing conditions that are very heavy at times, and you have to imagine new solutions. But you not only have to imagine new solutions and new ways of thinking, you also have to convince people to implement them. So how are you doing that? How are you working with different bodies of governments? How are you working with different institutions, different civic groups? How does that, what's the imagination there?
Actually, I don't have to imagine by myself.
Thank God.
Because there is a lot, there is already a lot of people imagining such interesting and inspiring projects. As a politician, I only have to help them, actually, help them spread their ideas and becoming bigger, actually. So that's the inspiring part of my job. Then I have to talk to other economic players. They don't are there yet.
Yes.
To say it so. I think how to make it. I think what I see in Brussels, though in the country of the global north, is that it's already changing. There is a lot of also old, let's say old or traditional companies which are already thinking about their social and environmental impacts. So my job is more to my job is more of incentive. I don't have a real regulation power, but it's working because I think things are changing, and such event like this shows it also.
And it's a lot of diplomatic work, I guess. You have to do a lot of...
Yes, yeah. Also between them, they should convince them. They can convince them much better than I could do. But there is something still. The old world is still very powerful.
Yes,
we have to face it. But things are changing, and there is also let's say a green acceleration.
So you would concur with Laura previously, where she spoke of collective imagination. That's basically where you stand, I would assume. Where you have to play the collective imagination.
I'm trying to accelerate it also.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Liz, I'd like to now ask you a few questions. You and I have run in the same circles in New York before, but how did you manage to end up in Ghana and working so closely with the country and its people?
Thank you, Nora. And on that, I'd like to just acknowledge that Solomon and I are here as part of a much larger delegation. So they're in the front row. Maybe if everyone can stand up.
Yes, please stand up. Please stand up.
A 20-person delegation from Contavanto.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I ended up in Ghana. I worked in the fashion industry. I studied design, and I worked as a designer and a stylist for a little while in New York City. And I was working in the industry at the time where everything shifted to a fast fashion business model. So even luxury brands were going from 2 seasons a year to 5 seasons a year and then to drops. And I saw the physical waste aspect of it, but honestly, that didn't bother me so much because I had the skills to tackle that. I had learned to sew, I knew how to design, so I thought, okay, I'll just upcycle. I'll just take stuff that exists and I'll make new stuff out of it. But what also happened during that time was that there was a mental toll that was taking place across the industry, where because people had to now work at a pace that is inhumane, they were suffering. And so a lot of the people I was working with turned to substance abuse or attempted suicides. And for me, that was the wake-up call of, if this is what's happening at a very high level, very privileged level within the industry, then imagine what's happening throughout the rest of it. So that was, for me, my breaking point, as many of us have had, of saying, what can I do differently? I don't want to be complicit in where this is going. So I started offering my services to anyone who would have me. And one of the companies I started working with was a fair trade fashion company that was founded by my now partner, Branson, and a Ghanaian artist named Ram. And so I first came to Ghana to upcycle clothes from Contamanto. I went to Contamanto within the first week, and it changed everything for me again. I think it was the first time that I really understood what a commodity is. Of course, you have a textbook definition, but when you see piles and piles of stuff, you know, people sitting on piles, the clothing flying across your face, you can't deny that so much effort, so much money is going into creating these things that ultimately just become weight. It's just weight being shuffled around the world, people taking a penny here, a penny there. And I realized it's much bigger than creating an alternative fashion brand for me. And I looked around and I saw Contamanto has thousands of tailors that are far more skilled than I am at upcycling, so why should that be the thing that I do? And I thought to myself, I'm coming from the place that is ignorant, that is dumping things here. So that's why we started the nonprofit, to try to educate and to support the good work that's already happening in Contamanto.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz, for this introduction. Solomon, on to you. Thank you for being here. So in your job, on a day-to-day basis, I must ask you as well, what is it like to be the director of the waste management in Accra?
Yeah, thank you. It's not an easy task at all. To give you an overview, as city managers, we are very much concerned with the informal economy that is rallying around the business of second-hand clothing, because it serves as a source of livelihood for some of our most informal sector players. At the same time, we have the responsibility for making sure that whatever residual effects, residues that come as a result of their business activities, we make sure we get rid of every discarded material from the space for effective management by way of treatment and then final disposal. But unfortunately, you wake up every day, and to give you an overview, you are overwhelmed with the tax that faces you. To give you a gist of it, the arithmetic, we can estimate that just about 50 long trailer articulator vehicles transport cargo from these containers from the port city of Tema to Katamanto community every week. And together, they discharge about 400 pieces of bales,
Wow,
each weighing 55 kilograms.
that's a lot.
So for that week, you have way over 1,200 metric tons of second-hand clothing that has come. Out of this, the quality of the textile clothing keeps going down to the extent that with the video you saw, they are able to do effective sorting, those first class, second class, third class, and the rest. Upcyclers will also take the third and second, turn them into other products. After all this, 40% of these 1,200 tons will be discarded, having nobody to purchase or having any value for it. And so they bring them to the streets and it is our duty to go and collect.
Yeah.
What that translates into is an average of 100 tons of only textile waste that you are supposed to deal with. And don't forget, the city of Accra generates way over 5,000 metric tons of municipal solid waste. This textile waste is not part of it. So, unfortunately, the logistics that we have as a city authority to be able to manage this textile waste is way inadequate.
Yes.
Because it is very complex. When you try to use the normal compaction trucks, it will destroy the pneumatic and then the hydraulic systems. So we are forced to improvise with tipper trucks. These tipper trucks can only collect just about 30% of the 100 tons. So it means 30 tons on average. The truck size can pick just about 25 tons, but we overload it to be able to take care of 30 tons. And this is transported every day to the only infrastructure that we have, which is a dump site. The rest of the 70 tons will be washed by the rain into the Atlantic Ocean. And don't forget, the following week, another 50 trucks are coming. On and on and on and on.
It's like a never-ending cycle of
So that's just
waste.
You to put yourself into the picture and put your feet into my shoes as a city manager in charge of managing all these wastes, both liquid, solid, drainage, and everything. And that's the task we go through on a daily basis.
I'm so honored and humbled by your work. Really humbled. Really. I'm going to ask you a question, Barbara. So, you know the situation. We know the situation. I'm not trying to guilt trip anyone. We've seen the film. We know where the waste comes from. How are you imagining with different bodies and working with the civil society to make sure that there is obviously less waste going there? So it's just to tackle the problem from the source, which is the consumption of it. Are there any types of regulation that you're trying to enforce? Because we know there are some regulations. It's not like they're not there. We know that there's a problem. Really, I feel like at this point, it's two things. Maybe it's a lack of information sometimes, although I think that now everybody knows the situation, but lack of information between the working ecosystem. But yes, and the second, I would say, it's really enforcing not just regulations, but a new way of thinking.
Yeah, we have to do both, actually, to create a new way of thinking and of consuming, and also to help or support new businesses, good businesses, to tell it so, and new regulation. The problem I see every day is that what the market offers us here in Global North is actually bad clothes, made unfair, of bad quality, and wasted, like we just saw. But they offer us at very cheap prices, so it's very affordable. So the businesses making good clothes, to tell it so, they are still in a very uncomfortable situation, actually. It's what they produce, because they respect the people and the environment. Actually, it costs more for them, and it's not affordable for everyone here. And that's a big problem. So we can change the way of thinking of the consumers. We have to do it, and we try to do it in different ways. We try to be positive and so on. But still, it's not cheap. I mean, it's not affordable for everyone.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have, like here in Paris, brands which are very aggressive and very affordable. So we are in a very unfair competition, actually. So only to change the way people think or consume won't be enough. So we also have to support new businesses in respecting the environment and the people, and we need regulation, because without regulation we can't make a fair competition.
Of course.
Yeah. So yes, we have to do everything at once.
And yes, and we will, hopefully. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's it.
Hopefully.
And we are doing it. I mean,
Yes, yes.
we have to do it.
Yes, yes.
We do it,
Yes. Change Now is a summit that's rooted in action.
of course.
We bring people on stage that are doing things. And Barbara, thank you for sharing with us what you're doing. But Liz, maybe you can, I feel like you're kind of like in between, you know, between the regulation and in between the last part of the process of these clothes that are just not good for us. I mean, I love this expression that says, I'm not rich enough to buy cheap things. And I feel like we're all collectively environmentally poor. So we just shouldn't be buying what we're buying, like, at the end of the day. And maybe I can ask you to say a question, like, given that you have this role within the foundation, what type of, other than the film that you are doing and you're sharing with us today, what are the things that you're trying to do to spread that awareness in collaboration with the regulations that are being developed?
Thank you so much. We're actually here in Europe to campaign around our Stop Waste Colonialism campaign, which is pushing for EPR policies to be globally accountable. So we see EPR, extended producer responsibility, being key to catalyzing what we call a justice-led circular textiles economy. So if you aren't familiar, France is the only country that has an EPR policy for textiles currently. And unfortunately, it's not doing the job that it set out to do. For one, the fee is very, very small. So brands are only charged around a penny per garment, which is not anywhere close to what it costs to actually manage waste. But then the bigger issue is that of the clothing that's collected in France, 80% of it is exported to the continent of Africa, and all the money that is collected to manage that waste stays here in France. So for us, this policy essentially codified waste colonialism, and the EU is looking to implement a harmonized policy across all member states for EPR. And so the reason that we're here, we came in November with our partners Vestiaire Collective. We met with policymakers here in France around the EPR policy here, but then now we're extending that more broadly to the EU. We're in Brussels, meeting with stakeholders there and really asking that these policies be made globally accountable. So if clothing is going to continue to be exported to places like Ghana, then money needs to come with it to set up infrastructure there. And it's very important, we're talking about reimagining. And for us, Contamanto is the alternative. Contamanto is not your average shopping mall. When here we go to a store, we see something on a rack, we want it in exactly our size, exactly the color that's, we came there to buy, or that the advertisement told us was cool or trendy. But Contamanto is not like that. You go, you select things, and you customize it. There's a lot of creativity. It's overflowing with creativity, and we need to support the skill set and the mindset that is there. And for us, EPR policies can do that.
Thank you. Progress. Solomon, I have a question for you. I mean, obviously, we know there's been a problem for quite some time now. It's not a new problem. So my question to you is, do you, and I'm hoping that you say yes, are you seeing less waste coming, or you see more and more? Is it a growing number of waste, of tons, or is it less? Drum roll.
No, going forward, if nothing is done, I rather see more waste coming. Waste in the sense that once the volumes coming are huge,
Yep.
and the sellers will have to find buyers. If they don't get buyers, they will have to free the space to get more bills to be able to salvage some quality products to be able to sell. And that means the quality keeps going down and down and down. So what I want to advocate for is, in addition to the EPR policies that will come to support infrastructure and logistics to be able to manage the waste. Don't forget, textile waste chokes up the landfills. It has caused our own, the only engineered landfill that we have as a city, into flames, just because it created some stagnation within the layer of the profile of the landfill, to the extent that it accumulated leachates because of the polyesters, the polyamides, and stuff that are associated with textile waste,
Yep.
thereby preventing methane gas from penetrating through the ventilation pipes. And as a result, accumulation of methane gas happened, and then the landfill exploded in fire, and we have to cap it. Now we are just using what we call dump sites. Dump sites are not the solution. And definitely there must be a sustainable way of managing these waste. And our mega taxes that are going into health, into education, into agriculture, cannot be channeled into the infrastructure that will manage textile waste that is not our waste anyway, but it is coming from the global north, who already have the logistics and the infrastructure to be able to manage. So something must be done at the upstream, which is, I'm very happy for the first panel. We must be able to think of materials that we can produce textile with that will be, if not even 100% recyclable, biodegradable, then 80%, 90% is the way forward. Until that is done, and then the quality, something must be there to be able to enforce the quality of products in order for them to prolong within the environment. Yes. Because if Europe doesn't have the land space to landfill even the bottom ash, how much more we, who do not have the incineration plants, and we are taking the raw textiles in, for how long can we be choking up our landfills? And currently we are traveling close to 100 kilometers away from the city to be able to dump. If that one gets full, we will be traveling 500 kilometers, and it will not help anybody in terms of climate change.
So share with me a little bit of wisdom, like into this question. Can there be hope in the middle of disaster?
There is clearly hope. As our foundation, we are very grateful to them. They've set up the way. Currently, we are working at solutions through their research and development laboratories, and we are able to create certain products such as fiber boards and stuff from the textile waste. Currently, some shipment is already on going to Finland, where they have the expertise to see how we can turn back these discarded waste materials into yarns, which will now come back to feed our textile industries back home in Ghana to be able to produce our traditional clothes. And once this is done, there is where we need the extended producer responsibility to come in to be able to upskill this, and then there will be hope for everybody. Else, if we remain in the current state without doing anything, especially on the EPR, definitely we are heading towards doom. Because don't forget, the 70 tons that are flowing into the oceans are stockpiling at the ocean bed. Yep. And with time, there will be upwelling of the sea. That's a natural phenomenon. If it happens, definitely the waste will flow from the Atlantic back to the Mediterranean, because there are no borders in the sea. And that will be an environmental catastrophe where aquatic life will go extinct. Yeah. And it will not augur well for anybody.
Yeah, and here we speak a lot about ocean cleanups. We can't just clean up on one side and then keep dumping. Like, it's just an ever-flowing, problem. You cannot just patch it up on one side and then just have waste being continuously dumped into the ocean. Liz, maybe you want to close up with one word, because I would like to honor, because you mentioned like the traditional clothing. We have someone in the audience that's wearing traditional clothing. I don't know if you can stand up for us.
Turn around.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
That's some clothing you don't want to dump.
Exactly.
Maybe you just want to share a few words about the community that's here today.
Contomanto is my favorite place on the planet. I think you asked about hope, and for me, Contomanto embodies imagination and hope, because every day you go there, people work 6 days a week, nonstop, taking a problem that is not theirs and being kind, not complaining, welcoming people to their space, using their ingenuity to make the best of what has been given, and we're fighting back. I think that our name, the OR Foundation, it means alternative, and for us that comes from the fact that the best resistance is an alternative, and again, for me, Contomanto is the best resistance on the whole planet that we have to fast fashion. And so all I want to do is be there to support these incredible human beings that I've become very lucky to know.